160 billion emails are sent daily. 24 hours worth of viewing material is uploaded to YouTube every minute. Nearly 2/3 of Americans own a smartphone. Technology is an interwoven part of our culture, easy to spot in almost every situation, on the street, in the schools, in the workforce, and in the homes. Over the generation, the use of technology has only grown and grown, but technology has not always had a positive effect. Technology, mainly focusing in on cell phones and computers, are having an effect on the indigenous people of America, specifically the Native Americans. Together, my team and I looked into this. We researched the background on technology, its involvement in our culture, Native American culture, using examples from the Yakima Indian Reservation in Washington State. We then concluded by analyzing the effects and similarities between these cultures and finished with what should be taken from this study. Mobile phones have changed the way we communicate. They started out as luxury and a major status symbol, and are now a vital part of our culture. We are free to make calls from almost anywhere in the world at any time we'd like. The first mobile phone call was made in 1972 from Martin Cooper, an engineer at the Motorola company. His phone was nearly 2 pounds and was lovingly referred to as the shoe phone for its design. In the late 1980s, cell phones were limited to a higher social class, mostly male. This gender stereotype was broken down eventually, but not until the late 90s and early 2000s. There is definitely not a cell phone stereotype today. Your 8-year-old brother has one, and your 80-year-old grandma has one. There's no age set. All over the world, cell phones bridge almost every gender and race gap. They're universal. It's a norm now to have nice forms of technology. The question is, has this introduction of technology, especially phones, been good? When is the last time you've seen a child coloring at a restaurant instead of playing on a tablet? Some call it an addiction, others call it communication. This integration of technology is our culture's social norm, a part of our physical and personal lives.
So we moved from the Bothell, Woodinville area of Seattle suburbs.
And what were your motivations for originally moving here?
Well, we came out here to work with a ministry called Sacred Road Ministries that's here on the Yakima Indian Reservation. And it was a pretty big transition, I think. Not only just moving from a suburb of Seattle out to the country, that in itself was a big change. It's a lot quieter and slower pace to life, and I'm pruning trees at the moment, which I never have done before. And because of poverty issues, because of lack of resources, in most homes, there's not a computer out here. When you get out of urban city areas, access to internet and there's no cable TV.
The main reason behind the lack of technological advancement in Native American reservations is due to the extreme poverty that they live in. They can't afford much of the technology out there. Even when they get phones, many of the youth only have it until they no longer can pay the phone bill. According to the United States Census of 2015, Native Americans have the highest poverty and unemployment rates. Our culture is heavily laden with technology that there is a shock to transition. But looking at it from a culturally relative way, these reservations simply have started much later in progression due to poverty. But the motivations behind the use of technology aren't much different at all. Many Native Americans today have adopted technology as a means of acceptance. This is an especially common thread among the youth.
There's so much neglect that I think some of the youth look toward social media as a way to get attention.
Yes. And not always healthy attention.
No.
The enculturation among young natives historically has been a very hands-on and attentive process. But with the introduction of poverty, it's taking apart families and distracting the young from their identities. Through comparing and contrasting both cultures, it's clear to see the same core values in the adaptation of technology to fit needs. Firstly, in simply the language itself. In Native American culture, language is used sparingly and never flippantly.
If you ask someone, how are you, like in Seattle, that's just a courtesy, how are you, I'm fine. If you ask that here, it's a loaded question. You might get to hear about how they tried to commit suicide yesterday. And so a lot of those kind of culture things, you're careful how you ask somebody about themselves.
The sociolinguistic variation in our culture's usage of texting can represent its effect on us. For instance, text speak is something that is learned as teens grow and fades into everyday speaking. The variations in text speak show respondents as, believe it or not, being creative and innovative in their usage of language. The shortened way of texting is often thought of as being representative of the dumbness of our generation, but when analyzing the purposes of cell phones and their role for communication in our culture today, it's evident that this means of texting among young people is themes-focused. Compensating strategies and simplifying the language is something that participants do to make up for the lack of paralinguistic cues that are used in face-to-face interactions. This mindset of compensating for lack of social cues has bled into other cultures, such as that of the Native Americans. For modern Native Americans today, technology is starting to bleed into their culture. Now, there is a distraction from the hardships and poverty, but also a distraction from the face-to-face interactions that their culture used to thrive on and take seriously.
Technology isn't used to really help. It's more of a distraction and entertainment to get out of and away from the problems that they're dealing with, day to day.
Studies done by Union College have shown that Native Americans crave simple face-to-face interactions. Social cues are shown simply in silence. When angry or upset, they tend to remain quiet. They value human contact, listening more than speaking. In technological communication, deliberate silence is used as passive aggression, rather than the maturity and norms taught to Native Americans.
I think learning to listen more than just sometimes I think in the city you can talk, and it's not a big deal, but here I feel like we've had to kind of get more reserved and pull back a little bit, I think.
The huge contrast between white culture and Native American culture is that while both cultures have accepted technology as a norm, ours has adapted it as part of culture. For Native Americans, unfortunately, they are beginning to lose pieces of the culture they had before.
I think the technology of today is causing their culture to be lost, the Native culture to be lost.
This, of course, poses the question, what have we lost from our culture that we have yet to really pay heed to? Is technology a distraction to us too? And if it is it a good one?
Drug abuse and physical and sexual abuse and those kind of issues that come along with that. Any escape from that is a welcome escape. And I think that's where sometimes technology comes in.
Historically, Native Americans have always been able to adapt to their situation through diffusion and other means. And currently, technology is simply another way of doing that.
When you don't have any money and you don't have a job and you're home all day with nothing to do, then technology can be that escape. Drugs can be an escape, you name it. We're trying to progress just to say that we're progressing, but what are we progressing to? Is it really better than before we had smartphones?
If anything can be drawn from these studies, it is that there is a common value of belonging in these cultures. In Native American culture, your tribe is your family. Kinship is taken very seriously in these cultures. For children and youth now living in poverty and the lack of strong family ties, they no longer have that kinship to cling to. This results in turning to technology, social media, and on the extreme side, drugs and alcohol. In Western culture, there is still that theme of belonging. When you go to any sort of college campus, you can observe people who aren't in groups staying close to their mobile devices for support. People spend more time plugged in. It's a comfortable situation that's been adapted to fit our culture's own norms through social linguistics and the like.
We have to use technology to get to where we want, but just technology for technology's sake, there's problems with that.